So this is going to look like this. We've got our starting page that we're used to. So we're going to switch over to driver, tap get started, and now we're given a list of nearby requests. So we know the driver's location and we're doing a request using parse server to get nearby requests. So if you have a look down the options available when you're writing your query, you should find one that enables you to find nearby objects. And then when we tap on one of these, so let's say we want to choose the 0.2 miles one, then you can see we're given both the driver's location and the user's location, and the driver has the option of accepting the request. And if they do, then that's updated on parse. We'll just stop the existing navigation. And it also redirects them to Google Maps so that they can see and be navigated to that location. Shouldn't take a long time for this one. And that's it. So a few small new things in there. We'll be doing a little bit of Googling to figure out, for example, how to get Google Map directions from your app. As always, give it a go yourself. Hope it goes well. Best of luck. All right, here we go then. I'm going to start with a new activity for our drivers to see all the active requests. So our usual empty activity. I'll call this view requests activity. There we go. And before we do too much with that, in the rider activity, I'm going to add a small logout button. So we'll pop this towards the top right. To allow the user, of course, to log out. There we go. So let's add that quickly into rider activity. So public void logout, called by the button view. And then we just want to log the user out using parseuser.logout and then redirect to the main activity. Via the application context, and main activity.class is where we want them to go. And then let's do that. There we go. So that will enable us to go back to our main activity, and then let's update redirect activity. So now if we're a rider, we'll still go to the rider activity, but if we're a driver, then we'll create a new intent. And this one will go to the view requests activity. There we go. So now over to view requests. This is going to be a pretty simple activity. It's just going to have a list view somewhere. There it is. Which will be full screen. I'll call it request list view, and then set up our list view. Request list view. This is going to be a list view from find view by ID r.id.request list view. In fact, we're likely to need that from several locations. So I'll define it up there and just create it here. Similarly, we'll need an array list of strings, which I'll call requests. And then initially, we'll just add a test to that array list, and then set up our array adapter. And create it here. So it's a new array adapter using this as the context, and then android.r.layout.simpleListItem1 as the template, and then requests as our array list. And then finally, we attach that to our requests list view. And just before we run that, I've just noticed that we're going to need to actually set up our array list there, otherwise we'll get a crash when we try and add to it. Okay, so let's do a quick test. We should now be able to log out of the rider activity and then log back in as a driver, and then we'll see our test item there on the list view. And here we go. So you can see we're currently logged in as a rider. So we'll tap the new logout button, which takes us back to the login screen. And now we can switch to be a driver, tap get started. And this now takes us to the driver list view. Excellent. I'm just going to update the title there. To say nearby requests. And now to offer nearby requests to our drivers, we need to know where they are. So we're going to need all the GPS related code from the rider activity. I think I'll do a bit of copying and pasting here to save us typing it all out again. So we've got our location manager and location listener. Copy that over. Paste in all of those. And then we're not going to need the Google map, but we will need location manager and location listener. And we'll also need the onRequest permission result method to do something when the user has given us permission to use their location. Alright, so obviously the update map method is not there. I think I may have copied one too many closing parentheses as well. Alright, so instead of an update map method, we're going to have an update list view method. Again, that will need a location, and we'll define it as public and void. There we go. Nothing else we need to change there, I don't think. Great. So the update list view method is going to do much the same as what we did here. but it will of course get the requests from our parse server. So first off, just in case we've got any active requests already saved, let's clear those. And then we're going to run a query to get nearby requests. So we'll create a parse query on parse objects, call it query. And this is going to be a parse query.getQuery on our request object, that is this one here. And we want requests that are near our current location. So we need to get our current location. So we'll create a geopoint. I'm going to call this geopoint location. And then we use new parse geopoint using location.getLatitude and location.getLongitude. And I'm going to do just a very quick check here to make sure location is not null. We've done lots of checks earlier in the code, so it very much shouldn't be, but it's a good idea to check that just before you attempt to get the latitude and longitude, just in case. So now we want to take our query and we're looking for where near. So this will allow us to put in a geopoint, i.e. our geopoint location, and it will find objects which are near our location, and it will order them by their closeness as well. So I just need to check the name of, we called location here, so we want where location is near our driver's location. And then I'm also going to limit the number of results. I don't think we need more than 10. It's likely that the driver will always choose the closest one anyway. And then we're going to run our query. So find in background with a new find callback. And as usual, we'll check for error being null and objects.size being greater than 0. So if we have some objects, we'll loop through them. So parse object, object in objects. And then the information I want to actually show on the list view is the distance to the request from the user's current location. So let's create a double called distance, and I'm going to have it in miles. So we'll have distance in miles. And then if we get the user's current location, so that's geo point location, you can see we've got these lovely methods which are perfect for what we want. So distance in miles to, and then we just need to get the request location. So that's going to be object.get and then location. But we will need to cast that to a geopoint. And by geopoint, I mean a parse geopoint. There we go. So that will get the distance in miles. That will generally be a very accurate number though. So I'm going to convert that to 1 decimal place. So distance 1 dp. And we can do that in Java using dot round. So there's no easy 1 decimal place method, but if we round our distance multiplied by 10 to the nearest number, and then divide that by 10, that will effectively give us a number to 1 decimal place. I just need to cast that to a double. So thinking about that, if for example we've got a number which is 1.3 and then a load of decimals, if we multiply that by 10, we get 13 point and then a load of decimals. If we then round that to the nearest whole number, it's going to be 14 because it's 13.6. So 14, and then if we divide that by 10, we get 1.4, which is the original number to 1 decimal place. There we go. So that's our process of rounding to 1 decimal place in Java. So then we just take our request and add that distance. So distance 1dp, and of course we're going to need to convert it to a string, and we'll add miles on the end there. Okay, and when that's done, we're going to want to update the list view. So let's take our array adapter and notify that the dataset has changed. And then I'm going to move the definition here to our onCreate method. And just to give them a message while it's loading, I'm going to take our requests and clear it just in case, and then I'm going to add getting nearby requests. Okay, so with any luck now we'll get the driver's location and then get a list of nearby requests in order, and we'll display the distance on those results. One more very quick change. I think we'll add a quick no nearby requests if there aren't any. So if object size is not greater than 0, we'll add a no active requests nearby. And then we'll move the array adapter to be updated down there. All right. So let's give that a try. And while that's compiling, I'm going to add a few more requests down here. So we'll add just a random username. And then I'll remind myself where the current locations are. So 52 and minus 0.35. So 52.1 and minus 0.36. Add another, number 2. And then 52.01 minus 0.355. Try that again, 52.01 and minus 0.355. There we go. Couple more. So 52.03 minus 0.356. Strange that it does that. That's better. And so that gives us 4. That's probably enough to be working with. Let's go and see it in action. And here we go. So you can see we've got one bang on, which is no surprise because we haven't moved since we created that one. And then the other ones that I created are a little bit further away. Of course, if I then update my longitude, say minus 0.35, that will update the request list. Excellent. So now we've got a list of requests. Our next step is to be able to view the precise location of these requests. So to do that, we're going to need a new activity, and this is going to be another Google Maps activity. I'll call it the driver location activity. And you can see it's jumped to the Google Maps API.xml, but we already have our key in there because we put it in there when we created the previous Google Maps activity. So we're going to want to jump to the driver location activity from the view requests activity. And we'll do that when they tap on one of the items in the table. And I'm going to do that by passing the driver's location and the user's location to the driver location activity. So we'll add this down in our onCreate method. And we'll take our request ListView, set on item click listener with a new on item click listener. And now we're going to want to pass not only the user's current location, but the request location as well. So we don't have a store currently for the request location. So let's set that up. We'll create an array list, and this is going to be of floats for request latitudes because we can't send locations directly in intents. So this is going to be a new array list of floats. And similarly, we'll have request longitudes. Which will also be an array list of floats. And then here, as we're populating the list view, we'll take request latitudes and add, and we want to get the latitude from the object location. So I think what I'll do is, rather than use that every time, I'll create a request location, which is going to be that object there. And then we'll use that there as well. Could even be very careful and check to see if request location is not null before adding it. And then request location.get latitude. And we've got a small issue there. It's because it's a double. Not a problem. I think the easiest thing would be to update these to doubles rather than floats. There we go. And similarly, request longitudes, we'll add request location.get longitude. And also, while we're there, let's not forget to clear And we'll do that just here. So after the find in background has happened, clear request longitudes and also requests latitudes. All right, so back to our on item click listener. We want to check that we can get the locations that we need to send. So I'm going to check to see if request latitudes.size is greater than, and remember I is the number of the row that the user pressed on. So if the user presses on the first row, that'll be I will be a 0. So we want request latitudes to be at least 1 in size. So I has to be greater than I. And similarly request longitudes and we're going to use the last known location as well. So that's here. So let's grab that. In fact, we'll grab it here and then add a check to make sure that last known location is not null. And we need to do our check to make sure we have permission. Or that the build version is less than 23, i.e. we're pre-Marshmallow. There we go, and we want this to refer to the activity. So we want view requests activity dot this. Phew. So if all those are the case, then we'll do the redirect. So we'll create our intent. And we want to redirect to driver location activity dot class. And then we'll add our extras. So we'll have user latitude, and this is going to be, in fact, we'll request latitude, keep our naming reasonably consistent. And this is going to be request latitudes dot get I, and then same for request longitude. That'll be request longitudes dot get I, and we've already done a check to be sure that that exists. Then we'll put the, I'll call it the driver latitude. And this is going to be the last known location dot get latitude. And finally, the driver longitude will be the last known location dot get longitude. And then finally, we'll start our activity and run the intent. Okay, and then for now, we'll just do a very quick recipient of that intent. So we'll get the intent. And for now, we'll just center it on the driver's location. So we'll create a new lat lung which will be intent.get double extra, and the double extra we want to get is the driver latitude. With a default value of 0, just in case something goes horribly wrong and we don't have a value. And another double extra, driver longitude, and again 0 will be the default. And we'll call this driver location. And we'll give it a title of your location. Phew. Now we seem to have an issue over in view requests activity. Ah, there we go. I've missed a semicolon, or I've got an extra parenthesis. Easily done. Okay, so let's take a look. We should now be redirected to the driver location activity, which will then show us the driver's location on a Google map. Our next step then will be to show both the driver and the user's location on the map, which will require quite careful framing because we want to be sure that both markers are shown on the map. So while that's compiling, let's have a quick jump over to Firefox and see if we can find a good way to do that. It's not an easy problem to solve. So let's take a look. Something like Android, Google Map, show 2 markers on map. Something like that. Let's have a look. And there we go. That first result looks pretty good. Zoom to show all the markers. That's definitely what we want to do. They've got 10 markers, but that's okay. So let's have a look at this. We're calculating the bounds of all the markers. So we're using a lat-lung bounds builder, and then we're looping through what looks like an array list of our markers, and then we're generating some bounds from those. Then we add in some padding and update the camera using those bounds. Okay. That looks pretty straightforward. We'll try that out once we've tested that everything's working over in our app. And here we go. Here's our requests. So let's tap on one of them. And there we go. So it's redirecting nicely and displaying correctly. Obviously the zoom isn't great, but we'll fix that now anyway using this code, which we're going to use to make sure that both of the markers appear in our map. So I've selected all of that. Let's get rid of anything that isn't code. And I think we'll use animate camera. So bring those in. Okay, so if we remember what's going on here, we're creating a lat-lung bounds object, and we're doing that from a array list of markers. So let's create this array list of markers, which I'll call markers, and it's going to be a new array list. So we haven't actually created a marker before, except when we're adding a marker here. So we should be able to take markers and then add, and then we just copy our marker creation code from there. But of course we will need to know the location before we do that. So now we've got the driver's location. Let's do the same thing, but adding the request location. Now to do that, we'll need to create a lat lung again for the request location. So this is going to be a new lat lung, and again we're going to use intent.get double extra, and I think I called it request latitude, but let's just check. Yep, so request latitude. And 0 just in case, and then intent get double extra request longitude with 0 as the backup. Okay, so now we've got our array list of markers. They're added to the map. Then we're looping through those markers and generating the bounds. So a bit of padding, I think let's go for 30 pixels from the edge, and then we update the camera, and so we no longer need our code to add those. And I'll just change that. It should work as Google Map, but as we've used mmap everywhere else to refer to our Google Map, we'll keep it there as well. All right, so before we run that, there's another change I'm going to make, and that is to add a request Uber button to the bottom of that screen. And this time I'm not able to drag my button in directly. So I'm going to show you a solution to that problem, which is to essentially create a relative layout to contain our map. So I'm going to copy the relative layout code from activity main and then go back to driver location and then paste that in before our fragment, and then we'll close the relative layout. I'm going to set all the paddings to 0 dp, so we go all the way to the edge of the screen. There we go. And we'll change the context to driver location activity. Okay, so now our map is contained within the relative layout, and we should be able to drag in our button. There we go, and position it now where we like. So I'm going to go for bottom center. I'm going to call it accept request button. On click is going to be accept request. And the text will be accept request. And then all we need to do is set up an accept request method called by a view the button, and here we need to do a couple of things. We need to update the request over in pass so that we know that it's been accepted, so it won't be accepted by someone else. And then we need to give the driver directions. So let's do the first thing first. In order to update the request, we're going to need to know which request it is. And that's something we haven't actually got yet. So let's add that to the view requests activity. So we'll add an extra and we'll have the username. And again, this is something that we don't have yet. So let's add this in here. It's going to be an array list of strings. And then we'll add that down here. So usernames, it's going to be add. And then we'll use object.get string. And the string is going to be the username. So that is this object here. Okay, so now we're going to pass that as well. So that's going to be usernames.get. And again, we want the ith one. And I'll just do a check to make sure that there are enough usernames to go round. There we go. So that should now pass on the usernames. Let's define our intent so we can get that wherever we need. And then we'll create a query to find the request. It's going to be a pass query.getQuery on the request class. And we want to find where the username is equal to, just pop those in, and we want intent.get string extra and username. There we go. Then we'll run our query with a new find callback. Check to see that E is null and that we have an object. Then we'll loop through them, although we're very much only expecting one here. And we're going to update that object with a driver username. And that driver username will be our current username. So get current user.get username. And then save in the background with a callback. So a new save callback. And as long as E is null, our final thing to do is then to get directions to this new location. Again, that's something we haven't done before, so let's see if we can figure out how to do it. So Android get directions to location, and I'll pop in Java just because if I didn't have Java, it might look like I wasn't making an app, I was just seeing how to use Android itself. So now that top result looks pretty good. So looking at that one, it actually looks like he's trying to draw the directions on the map, which is not what we want. We want the actual driving directions. So on location change, not really. This one looks better. Launching Google Maps directions via an intent. That's definitely what we want to do. Okay, and there we go. That looks pretty super simple. So we're creating an intent. we're then creating a URI, which is a Google Maps URI with the what looks like the starting point and the finishing point right there, and then we're starting that activity. So let's add in URI. Okay, so yeah, we'll put that on the next line so we can see all of it. So then I'm going to call this something else so we don't confuse it with our previous intent. And then we just need to get all of the values from our initial intent. So it's going to be a bit messy, but here we go. So intent.get double extra, and this is going to be the starting point latitude. So that's the driver latitude. With a 0 just in case. And I'm going to copy that and replace it there. Let's put backslashes in rather unhelpfully. I don't need those backslashes. There we go. So now we want driver longitude. And then we want, again without the backslashes, the request latitude. And finally, in fact we don't need anything after that. So just the request longitude. There we go. So that should create the Google Maps URL, and then we just start the activity to direct them to the rider. All right, let's have a look and see if that works. And here we go. So let's try the second result and see what we get. And sadly we get a crash, but let's not worry. Let's have a look and see what's gone wrong. Look over in run. So error using new lat long bounds, map size can't be 0. Most likely the layout has not yet occurred for the map view. Okay. That's a shame because we're running this in the onMapReady function, so you might expect the map to be ready, but presumably it's not laid out yet. So let's go and see our previous answer and see if there's any help there. Aha. Almost all movement methods require the map object to have passed the layout process. You can wait for this to happen using the add-on global layout listener. Right. Okay, let's see if there's any greater assistance there. So they've got that specific error that we found and they've got a solution to it, but they said they couldn't use on global layout listener. So let's see. Here we go. This is how to use on global layout listener. So let's do it the proper way. So we'll go back over and we'll do this in onCreate. So we're accessing the relative layout, which we have, but we haven't given an ID to yet. So let's get our relative layout and give it an ID. I'll call it map relative layout. There we go. And then we're taking our map layout and adding an on-global layout listener. Here we go. So that's where we write our code to update. Everything that we need. So that should work fine. I think I'll just define my intent a little bit earlier so that it can be accessed, just in case we have any problems with the map layout. All right, let's give that a try. As I've said before, if you get a crash, don't panic. Just go in, look at the error message, try and see what's going on. If you really can't figure it out, Googling the error message will normally get you the solution to the problem. Someone's probably been there before. All right, so let's try it again. 0.4 miles. And there we go. So we get our nice animation and both of the markers are shown on the map. And let's try the accept request button as well. We'll open that with the Maps app. I'll change that to the default for this device as well. And then accept that. Skip the sign-in process for now. And there you go, you can see we've got the navigation there. So just tap Start Navigation and we're good to go. All right, so we're pretty much there for the driver side of things now. Just a couple of small tweaks. The first is you may have noticed that we had two markers of the same color, which made it a little bit unclear which one was which. So it'll be nice to have different colored markers. Let's see if we can figure out how to do that. So Android map, change marker colors, something like that. There we go. So go straight down to the answer. And that looks good. So we change the icon, default marker, and then we change the color there. I think that might actually be something that we've done before. But let's add that in. So we'll change the color of the request location to blue. Okay. And the other change that we need to make is, now that we've got requests that have been accepted, and to see that we'll need to do a full refresh here because we've got a new column. We should find, yes, that this request has a driver username, and we don't want to show those sort of requests in the request list because they're already taken. So let's add to the query. Take our query and we want to find where the driver username is undefined. So for that we can use query.where does not exist. And the thing that we want not to exist is the driver username here. We want it to be undefined. There we go. So let's have a quick look at that in action. We should now find that we can only see 3 requests in the user list, and also that when we view a request, we see the markers as different colors. And here we go. So first off, we can't see that request that we're no longer interested in. And secondly, if we take a new request, you can see we can now see both of those as different colors. Although, having done that, I think I'm going to increase the padding slightly because they're still a bit too close to the edge for my liking. So let's just quickly change that. I'll change that to 60. There we go. So that's as far as we're going to go for the driver. Now, all that remains is to update the rider's view so that they know that a driver's on the way, and we're going to tell them how far away the driver is as well. We'll do all that in the next video.